Air shows, there's a reason there's no chaos there in the ballet in the sky. We're going to pull the screen away and go behind the curtain and take a look in the hangar. Hi, I'm Dan Millican. Welcome to In the Hangar, brought to you by Wingfield Aviation. Well, we're going to be pulling away that curtain and talking to what goes on behind the scenes at the air show. So let's turn it to our distinguished panel. We've got Robert Johnson representing the pilots
Good to see you, my
of
friend.
the airplanes. We've got the air boss himself, Russell. Thank you, Russell, for coming. And we've got the voice of the air show, the announcer, Rob Lowe. Thank you guys for coming. All right, so first of all, I've never heard of an air boss. What in the world is an air boss?
At an air show, when you have an air show, you have an air boss, and the air boss is the conductor of the orchestra. They're the primary person responsible for and in charge of the safety of the event and then the execution of the event.
Okay, and then what does is there a script you follow? Is there what's going on?
So I work largely with the air show director who hires the acts, and then we put the acts together into a lineup and a script, and then we try and pre-work out a lot of the intricacies of moving all those pieces around to bring it all together to make one big show. And of course, you plan it and brief it, and then at the moment of execution, it's just a free-for-all.
Really? I mean, when we're seeing these guys pass each other at 18 inches or whatever, that's just a free-for-all.
Yep, pretty much, because we sit there and we plan it and we brief it, but then a lot of things happen during the day. Things change, and so it's very fluid.
What might change?
My airplane didn't start.
Okay.
So now all the acts behind you have to either go early until I can get you back into the sequence. And so that's usually the biggest impact to a timeline. I got a thunderstorm coming through. It's going to be here in 30 minutes. It will be here for 20 minutes. Do we cancel the show? Do we delay the show? How we move all those pieces around. So it's a lot of that kind of decision-making that happens real time that you can't plan for.
And Robert, he mentioned that scripting it, that the shows are coming in. How much do the air show elements, the pilots, do they come in and say, here is our show, or is there any flexibility in what the air boss may say, well, our audio, or the air director or whatever?
Air boss, yeah.
Okay, well, and then you said you talked to a director.
The air show director.
The air show director.
The whole event.
Do they come in and want you to tweak your show, or you come in and you say, this is it?
We pretty much come in with a single act. We have a couple options. In our case, we fly 2 airplanes. So if we have a show that only books 1 airplane, we'll obviously fly 1 airplane or have a mechanical issue. If there's weather, we can fly a low show or a flat show as well. So we need a certain weather minimum so we can fly our full routine and do full loops. We also have a low show and a flat show. But as far as the act itself, what we do, the maneuvers we do, no, that's up to us. And we have a very scripted show that we do. And the boss basically, when it's our turn, he'll say the air show, the air box is yours. And we own that airspace for the duration of our flight unless boss tells us to knock it off, which does happen sometimes.
And why would boss tell you to knock it off?
Airliners?
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 Yeah, so recently when Robert and I were working together last time, we were at Midland, and Midland has airliners that come in during the show. And
Part of the show. No, I'm just kidding.
Not intentionally, no.
well, yeah. And so what happens, of course, is they're early, or they're late. They're rarely on time, exactly on time. So they'll be early or they're late. So last time we were working together, everything was working just fine, and then moving pieces around, we had about a 5-minute delay, and an airliner showed up early. And so they're coming into the box, and I had to call them up and say, terminate, fly through, go to the hold. Airliner's 4 minutes, and then so they had to delay 4 minutes, and then we get right back into it. So those kind of things will happen.
So are you talking directly with ATC?
So at that particular show, I'm actually in the tower. Okay. But yes, so at most shows, I'll come up and the air traffic control tower gives me the airspace. So now I own the airspace, I own the airport, I own the TFR, and I control everything on the ground and in the air. And then it becomes a little bit of a dance because I need information from the ATC, and I need it at a certain time, and I need it in a certain way. And so it takes a little bit to build that relationship.
At the bigger air shows, will there be multiple air bosses, or I guess one air boss with? What's happening at, by the way, at like something like Osh?
So Oshkosh has 4 air bosses, and they all have their sliver of responsibilities, and then they run multiple runway operations. So that's a little bit different type of dance. But at a place like Houston, my dad and I do Houston together, and it's so long that I actually leave the briefing early with the first half of the show and start. And I'll run the first half of the show, and then he'll do the second half of the show. So some places do have multiple air bosses. And some places, there are places I go where I'm in for the whole weekend.
And how long is an air show usually?
We tend to stick around that 3 or 4 hour mark, but there are shows like,
Like Houston, how long is that one?
9 hours.
Holy cow.
It's all day, yeah.
Okay, and so then while this is going on, Rob, you're an air show announcer. Are you given a script, and what are you reading and saying?
So it's some of both, Dan, actually. Acts like what Robert flies, they provide us a script. It has bio info on the pilots. It has, oftentimes it'll tell a little bit about how long they've been flying together, what kind of things they do. A lot of acts will give us the sequence, so we know what maneuvers are coming next. But it's not necessarily a read it in this order line thing. And what happens is, you heard them describe, we have to be flexible. So a lot of times we end up filling time.
Yeah, you have a lot of background, you just fill time.
We
So it's
do.
like a sports commentary.
In some ways, it's a little different than sports commentary you might be used to on the radio or TV. Play-by-play, in that context for sports, is describing everything. This is really a lot more akin to public address announcer you might hear in a sports venue, like if you're at a football game.
Yeah.
You can see it, you're there with your eyes, you can see what's going on, but what about that don't you know? I don't know the pilot's name, I may not know what kind of airplane that is, the history of that particular airplane, the history of the pilot, maybe the maneuver he's doing, he's going upside down, but what is that? And then we try to also, our role really is one of improving the fan experience, right? Trying to make it a quality experience for them. So in a lot of cases, hearing that airplane fly by is a big piece of that. So I don't want to talk over that. I want to talk when they're making their turn, and then let everybody enjoy the aircraft when they come back through.
Are you controlling the music element, or is that like the director, air show director?
Oftentimes, there's another party that provides that service. They provide the sound system. They provide the music. Now, we work in close coordination between the air boss and the announcer on that. Some acts provide specific music they want to fly to, others don't. But much like TV and radio, dead air is a really bad thing.
You were right, I was
So
gonna
you
ask,
never
yeah.
want to have dead air. There's usually some sort of music going underneath the talking. And then we also have, in addition to the acts that fly, the air show production team provides us all the sponsors that have helped them put that on. They have people that they want to promo. They've sold
So
ads.
you've got stuff you're gonna-
So we've got a lot of stuff that we work in. In fact, most of those are contractual requirements for the air show that we have to meet. Bigger shows like Fort Worth Alliance, we have a defined script. This ad has to be read 8 times during the day. This one has to be read 6 times. This is our title sponsor. Say this 22 times.
Right.
Those kind of things.
Right, and as Taking Off has grown and In the Hangar has grown, we've been blessed to be able to get some sponsors. So like, as I mentioned at the beginning, Wingfield Aviation, but also Flying Eyes is a great sponsor for us now with products we believe in. So there's a plug.
That's how
Notice
we do
how
it.
I
Just
weave
like
that in. So, all right, so Rob, how did you get into air show announcing?
So I have a little over 20 years of sports public address announcing in stadiums.
Oh, wow. Man,
and-
you are a man of many talents.
So I started out, frankly, it was my oldest child was a baseball player, and it was a sub-varsity game, and somebody said, hey, can somebody do it? I had a little radio time, and that's where it started. But I grew up as an airplane nut and have loved aviation my entire life, and the air show announcing piece is really a blend of my 2 passions. And so it's really probably the funnest thing I do anytime is air show announcing.
Wow. How do you get to be an air boss?
Now, so the rules have changed. The world of air bossing, it used to be just, hey, you're the air boss. You drew the short straw and you were the air boss that day. Now there's a whole process and an apprenticeship process you have to go through. You have to take a test, you have to go apprentice, you have to get letters of recommendation, and then you have to be observed. And then you have to get signed off, and then you'll get a letter of authorization to be an air boss from the FAA. And that's the process now.
It is really interesting. There are good air bosses and bad air bosses. And as a pilot, I'm sure you've seen this as an announcer, bad ones are frankly really bad, and good ones like Russell are really good. It does make a huge difference to the safety of the show and how the whole show works as well.
You know, in the unfortunate and tragic situation of something going bad, is that usually on the air boss?
Shouldn't be.
No, generally not. I mean, it depends on what happened and why. There have been some design issues in acts that have caused accidents. But it's a team effort, right? So using that analogy of being the conductor of the orchestra, if you play the wrong note, you play the wrong note. I have to put the whole.
The conductor didn't control that.
Right.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if you have tragedy at an air show, I don't care about that. Like, something bad has happened, we can get to why later. And for me, from the air boss perspective, it's okay, you know, what am I going to do in that first 60 seconds that something happens? Because that's the critical time.
Right. Okay. And I guess, like you said, that's a good analogy. You know, if the kettle drum didn't hit it, then they didn't hit it. There's nothing you can do as a conductor.
Nope, and we just keep playing.
All right. So how did you personally become an air boss?
So I grew up in this business. My dad's been air bossing since the 70s. I grew up, my dad was the president of the Confederate Air Force. He was president of the Lone Star Flight Museum, Texas Aviation Hall of Fame. So I literally grew up flying to air shows on warbirds my whole life. So it's all I know. And since I was a little kid, can I talk on the radio? Can I talk on the radio? Can I talk? That's all it was. And then when I was about 14, he let me talk on the radio, and that was the coolest thing ever. And ever since then, I've just been just trying to get better and keep working at it. And it's about a 4-year apprenticeship for me. And when I was 18, I ran my first air show by myself in San Antonio.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is this all you do?
No. Like many things in aviation, no.
Right.
No, I work for a multi-state collision repair facility.
Okay.
Yeah, working on cars.
Right. 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 And I guess in air shows, nobody's doing it full time unless you're the Blue Angels. But and then Robert, of course, as a pilot. You know, we've talked before. We've had you on talking about the Trojan Flyers, but you know, for somebody wondering who hasn't seen that, how does somebody become an airshow pilot?
In my case, I got pretty lucky. I think it's probably the case for a lot of people. We've got a partnership of 2 T-28s that have been doing air shows for 20, 25 years. I've been flying with the team for 12 years. This will be my 4th air show season. So we had the other person who's flying my position, the Trojan 2 position, had to quit flying, and basically the flight lead kind of goes around the room and goes, "Okay, your turn, Robert." And I spun up and got my rating to fly air shows 3.5 years ago now. You do go through a process with the FAA. There's an organization called ICAST, International Council of Air Shows, that basically runs the program. But you train, and you show demonstration of training. Then you go with an examiner. It's called an aerobatic competency evaluator, an ACE, and they give you a ground oral and then watch you perform a routine at an 800-foot altitude, and they'll sign you off at that point. You get a letter from the FAA at that point, a statement of aerobatic competency. You fly a bunch of air shows at 800 feet, then you can retest for 500, then for 250 down to surface. And the guys who've been in the business a long time all have surface cards. I've got my 250 card now. And there's formation aerobatics. There's all kinds of stuff that you have to get a check ride essentially for.
Is that organization that gives you that certification the same one that certifies air bosses?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a whole system there. You said season. When is the air show season?
Essentially spring through late fall. It depends on the part of the world you're in. There was an air show, I guess, last weekend.
Last
2 weeks ago.
weekend in Laredo.
Yeah.
Is that the one that kind of kicks it off? In Laredo?
Yep, Laredo,
Yeah,
Texas.
it was an early
Yep.
show season. Usually for us, it starts March, April, and then goes to maybe early November.
Yep.
How many air shows do you announce?
Typically, during the year, it's an announcer can do just a handful up to 30 or 40. So I personally do about 10.
And you do Alliance?
I co-announce Alliance with one of the really famous announcers, Danny Clisham, is gracious enough to share the stage with me. That's become a very big show, and I really enjoy that. It's a great opportunity.
Yeah, I was. I did have to admit that until Alliance this past fall, I had never been to an air show. I love aviation. I love planes, and my family doesn't. So I was always like, "Hey, I want to take the kids to Alliance," and never could. But anyway, I made my first one, so
Nice.
I'm very thrilled for that. Okay, so and then how many shows do you do as Air Boss?
I do around 15 a year.
15 a year.
Yeah.
And what's the biggest one?
Wings over Houston.
The Houston one, the 9-hour marathon.
It's 3 full days. Yeah, and I do that one with my dad. We split that one.
Right.
Yeah.
And Robert, how many air shows do you fly?
8 to 12 generally in any given season. Depends on how the year goes. I've never actually flown Houston. I'd really like to.
I'm sure you would. Several people would.
Well, maybe you can work that into your pitch. And, yeah.
Package deal.
Well, which brings up an interesting question. How do acts get selected for air shows? Is that something the Air Boss does or the director? How does that work?
Generally, the air show director will hire an act, and we have the International Council of Air Shows has the big convention early December, and a lot of them will come there and they meet everybody, and then they'll select the acts that they want, to display the air show they want or to match the theme that they picked and that year and things like that. So generally, that's going to be the air show director, and once the acts are selected, that's where I generally get involved in. Okay, this is about how long your air show is, and you wanted a 3-hour air show, but you have only hired a 2.5-hour air show. So you need to hire 2 or 3 more acts, and we go through that. And then once we have the acts, we put them together to make it as entertaining as we can.
I guess it's just like anything, so everybody's trying to get, I guess the Trojan Flyers are, attending the trade show, trying to get air shows and everything else. And what are some of the biggest acts like at Houston?
Well, Houston, because it's a large market, they generally get the Thunderbirds and Blue Angels or Snowbirds every year, and then they'll usually get a single ship demos like an F-18 or an F-16 or the F-22. And then some of the bigger sponsored acts like Sean Tucker flew for Oracle, so they'll come out and do that as well. But what's really unique about Houston is because so much of the warbird community is in Texas, it's got a huge warbird presence. So we have a trainer parade that will have 30 to 40 aircraft airborne at the same time, talking about all the training aircraft and things like that. But I've worked air shows where I had an air show on Mother's Day, so they hired a ton of women air show pilots. And so we had an air show that was almost exclusively female aviators, and that was a lot of fun. And then, like up in Michigan, they'll do the gathering of Corsairs, and they try and get every Corsair in the country to come. And one year they did it with B-17s, and there's not many places you can find 4 flying B-17s and things like that. So the theme will usually determine who comes, but it's up to the air show director.
Well, very good. Well, guys, I really appreciate you coming by and setting me straight on air show behind the curtain going-ons. So thank you, Robert,
Dan, always a pleasure, my friend.
Russell,
Thanks, sir.
and Rob.
My pleasure.
All right, I hope to see you guys at an air show soon. And let's go flying again in the T-28. See if you can get me to throw up.
Oh, that's a deal. That's a challenge.
That's a challenge. All right. And thank you guys for watching. And make sure you go to those air shows. And now when you go, you can kind of understand a little bit more what's going on behind the scenes. Somebody talking to the pilots and somebody announcing, telling you what's going on. And we'll see you guys next time in the hangar.